Hey everyone, the purpose of this video is to explain a really important but somewhat difficult concept in poetry, or any spoken verse for that matter, and that is rhythm. Um, Everything from this PowerPoint has been adapted from www.writingrhymeandmeter.com. It's a really good website that discusses rhythm and meter, and basically how to write poetry, but it's great for our purposes because it really clearly and concisely explains how rhythm works in poetry, how we can understand it, and how we can begin to discuss it. Okay. Now, rhythm is something that most students find quite difficult to grasp, mainly I think because we're not very conscious of rhythm in our everyday lives. It's not something that we connect with that well. But if you think about it, there are a lot of things in your life that actually involve rhythm. For people who play sports, you kind of get into a rhythm. For people who do anything, for example, or something that's repetitive and something that requires practice or training, it's very important to get into a rhythm, so to speak, or a kind of pattern of doing things. And it's the same thing in music. I assume that we all listen to music. And rhythm is really important in music because it organizes all the sounds, it organizes all the expression into something that overall is usually quite pleasing to the ear. So rhythm actually adds that extra level of complexity into poetry. It's different from like prose, which is I suppose what you would normally associate with novels and stuff, because it doesn't necessarily, prose doesn't necessarily incorporate the importance of rhythm, although you would probably notice some aspects of rhythm in prose. Anyway, I'm ranting a bit. So I'm going to split this into a few videos. This first one is just going to talk a bit generally about rhythm in poetry and then introduce you to the concept of meter. So these are the aims of the presentations and these videos. So to exemplify and introduce important terms that will help you to discuss rhythm in poetry, to give you understanding so that you can apply these terms, and to help you to understand how the rhythm of a poem can create more layers of meaning in a poem. Something that you'll definitely need to comment on in your analysis of poetry. So why is rhythm important in poetry? 4 reasons I've put down here, but of course there are more. Firstly, it can create or complement a certain mood in poetry. It can dictate the pace of a poem. Breaks or changes in rhythm can indicate something to the audience, which is quite common in classical music or any kind of song, for example, where there is a rhythm change. It usually is trying to indicate something. So when the rhythm or the beats increase in frequency, it usually indicates a kind of quickening or heightened sense in a song. Almost the same thing in poetry, or similar things in poetry. And lastly, something that I've already mentioned, you've all listened to music before without rhythm. There would be no order or organization, resulting in an inconsistent and unenjoyable experience. So rhythm is key to the experience of poetry. So we need to go beyond just looking at the content and the language of the poem to thinking about how rhythm can contribute to the meaning of the poem and how it complements everything that the poet is trying to achieve through a poem. So I want to introduce you to this concept of meter. A complex definition of meter is the arrangement of words, syllables, or sounds into a regular recurring pattern. In poetry, it is the rhythmic pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables that make up verse, or in other words, poetry. I will go through stressed and unstressed syllables in another video, but for now what you need to know is that an easy way to remember meter is that meter equals rhythm, which is a pattern. What it does is that it describes or measures the rhythm of a poem. Now, what does this mean? Well, it's very similar to other concepts, other types of measurement, for example, length, size, weight, speed. So, for example, speed and velocity measure or describe how fast or slow something is going, and weight measures or describes how light or heavy something is. Meter describes or measures the rhythm of spoken verse of poetry. Okay, so the idea of meter is something that can describe or measure rhythm. An easy way to remember it, it's kind of like this, helps me anyway. If we compare things like meter and weight, so meter is made up of syllables, weight is made up of grams, units of measurement in meter are feet, and units of measurement in weight are kilograms. So just remember that it's a way of describing or measuring rhythm. Okay, in successive videos, I'm going to discuss the different units of meter, that is syllables and feet, and how that can actually be used to describe rhythm and how that contributes to the meaning of a poem.